Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for coming. I want to announce news about a bill that I've introduced in the Congress this week, and it's about amending the RCRA Act. Many of you know that the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, in short form RCRA, of 1976, requires the safe disposal of solid waste and hazardous materials. It's an integral part of our national environmental protection laws. In 1980, RCRA was amended to exempt waste from the production and development of oil and natural gas. Production of oil and natural gas are referred to briefly as E&P waste, and also geothermal waste. In 1988, the EPA issued a regulatory determination further exempting these wastes from RCRA's most stringent safety requirements. This left the task of regulating disposal of these wastes to the states, with predictably mixed results. Recent reports show the extent of the problem and highlight the potentially fatal consequences. The problem is industry waste endangers public health and the environment. The regulatory determination that I just discussed was issued before the use of fracking, which uses particularly toxic chemicals, and that had become commonplace. But fracking remains exempt from RCRA's Subtitle C standards for safe disposal of hazardous waste. This means less scrutiny on the industry's waste disposal practices, posing unnecessary risks to the public health and environment. Exempted E&P waste includes drilling fluids, cuttings, produced water, used hydraulic fracturing fluids, rig wash, workover wastes, tank bottom sludge, glycol-based dehydration wastes, amine-containing sweetening wastes, hydrocarbon-bearing soil, and many other individual waste products. In its 1988 regulatory determination, EPA admitted that E&P wastes contain toxic substances that endanger both human health and the environment and cause cancer. Despite noting that the benzene, phenanthrene, lead, arsenic, barium, antimony, fluoride, and uranium found in E&P wastes are of major concern and present at levels that exceed 100 times EPA's health-based standards. Oil and gas companies, nevertheless, are excused from requirements to dispose of them safely. Widespread evidence, I'm going to let this fella go by. Widespread evidence suggests public exposure to these toxins through air, soil, and local water sources. The simple solution: hold producers to the same standard as other industries have to comply with. Regardless of which industry produces these harmful substances as waste, nobody wants them in their drinking water. Fortunately, there is a simple solution. And the solution is that we must act today to eliminate this dangerous exemption from RCRA. Yesterday in the Congress of the United States, I introduced the Cleaner Act, which is H.R. 2825, which eliminates this 33-year-old loophole in RCRA to account for changing technology and economic realities and protects public health and the environment from irreparable harm. I'm proud to say that I have Got it? All right. I'm proud to say that I have 43 co-sponsors in the United States Congress supporting this bill, and that number continues to mount. It's so important that we stand up for our environment, and I intend to go forward in the Congress as a leading voice among those who intend to do that. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Are these the loopholes you were talking about during the campaign last year?
The question is, are these the loopholes that I was talking about during the campaign last year? The answer is technically no, Boris. What I was talking about a lot last year was the Halliburton loophole. And the Halliburton loophole is something that allows oil and gas drilling companies to keep secret the toxic materials that they use in their fracking fluids. That is something that I promised to address early on in my congressional career. The first thing we saw was that somebody else already has that bill to do that, and that's called the Frack Act. And I believe it's Congresswoman Diana DeGette out of Colorado who has that, and I immediately co-sponsored her bill. The loophole we're talking about now is the loophole in RCRA for the disposal of hazardous waste. There's really no reason to exempt oil and gas extraction companies from complying with the law that every other kind of industry in the United States has to comply with.
What do they do with these wastes now?
It's hard to say. I'm not in a position to answer that question. But what we do know is that it's a patchwork of regulation from state to state that regulates what happens to the waste. But we know that they don't have to comply with RCRA, so that's a serious concern.
Todd? There's also concern on many of the people who live in these areas of the naturally occurring radiation, radioactive materials that come up from 5,000 feet with the flowback material and are located in the cuttings. And as I understand it, those cuttings are being landfilled. And this also look at the
Yeah, the question is, what about the radioactive waste that comes up when fracking fluid comes back up from its application underground? The suggestion is, yes, it goes into landfills. And what are we doing? Because we know that there is naturally occurring radioactive material underground, far, far underground, that comes up with the regurgitation of the fracking fluid, and again, without stringent regulation, there's nothing to stop that going into landfills. There's no real attention paid, depending on what state you're in, and I'm not aware of close attention in Pennsylvania being paid to what happens to that.
How did this come to your attention?
The truth is, and I've said this time and time again, Boris, I have hired a phenomenal legislative staff. They understand my priorities are to stand up for the environment and protect drinking water, not only in northeastern Pennsylvania, but all across the United States. And so they've been on the lookout for bills that would make sense like this. This is not the first closure of loopholes that we've done. Since I joined the United States Congress, I have introduced 15 bills. This is the second loophole closure bill, you might say, that I've introduced. And the first one was the Fresher Act, which closed loopholes for oil and gas companies having to do with stormwater runoff in CERCLA. So another vitally important federal environmental law that exempted oil and gas companies that I didn't think belonged there. I have to say that this is the beginning of a long road. There are powerful forces arrayed against the implementation of these new laws. They are bills now, they are not laws yet. But I am here to tell you that I will continue to build support for these laws because, you know, the people of northeastern Pennsylvania deserve to have safe and clean drinking water, safe well water, and they deserve to be able to sleep easy at night, not worrying about whether their family, whether their children will be contaminated by unregulated fracking materials. And this, of course, applies across the United States.
The Halliburton loophole, we don't know what goes in. But through legislation, we'll know what comes out.
Again, the Halliburton loophole was something that prevented, that immunized basically oil and gas companies from having to reveal the toxins that they use in their process. Again, that relegates this whole subject to the patchwork of state regulation, and it goes from state to state. And there are places in the country where they do reveal their toxins. I should also say this: you know, this is not an attack on hydraulic fracturing. The natural gas boom in this country is something that everybody recognizes can be a good thing, can be something that will aid in our quest to reduce our carbon footprint, can be something that will aid in our quest to reduce our dependence on foreign energy. But we have to do it safely, and we have to do it right. And it's not the companies with the utilizing the best practices that we're worried about. It's the companies utilizing the worst practices. And we have to establish a floor, a baseline that will help regulate those companies that kind of need some help keeping the environment safe and clean. You know, you only get one chance to do this. Once you mess up an aquifer, nobody knows how to fix it. Nobody knows how much it'll cost. Nobody knows how long it'll take, and nobody knows if you can even do it. So if you only get one chance to get it right, I say let's get it right.
What's the status of regulation in Pennsylvania? You said there was a patchwork across the country.
Well, it's, Boris, your own newspaper, I think, had to file a lawsuit to find out how, through Freedom of Information Act, had to find out from the state government how many spill situations, how many contaminations had occurred. And I think it ended up being well over 100, maybe over 200 contamination situations having to do with hydraulic fracturing in Pennsylvania, much of it in northeastern Pennsylvania. And you know, the thing that comes to mind about Pennsylvania regulation of hydraulic fracturing is they don't do nearly enough of it. The only metric that really comes to mind that is measured in Harrisburg right now is how fast drilling permits are approved. It's not like that all over the United States. There are some places that do it better than we do, but I intend to be a strong advocate for national standards on fracking, because it's not just here in Pennsylvania. It's in the Dakotas, it's in Ohio, it's all over the place. Let's get fracking right in this country.
Would this bill prevent the gas industry from putting specific toxic chemicals into the ground?
What it does is there are a whole series of regulations that the EPA has that regulate how toxic materials are handled, and it basically makes them applicable to the toxins used in oil and gas extraction. And I gave a whole long list of the types of applications that toxins are involved with, so that making them subject to the stringent EPA requirements is what I'm after. Okay? Thanks very much, everybody, for coming out.